Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the Incognito series, casual psychedelic conversations on cognitive liberty.
Mr. Joël, thank you for joining us on another episode number I don't know of Incognito.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Do you want to start off just introducing yourself to whoever is listening to this? Tell us a bit about who you are, what you do.
Yes, indeed.
How did you get here?
Yeah, my name is Joël Brierre, and I'm founder and CEO of Kaivalya Kollectiv, which is a psychedelic forward retreat and education company, mainly focusing on 5-MeO DMT at the moment, down here in Tepoztlán, Mexico, and we also do some work in Jamaica. My background is in yoga. I've been teaching yoga and meditation and Vedantic philosophy for maybe 13 years now, and Vedanta is kind of the summary of the Vedas, or the summary of the backbone scriptures of the yogic traditions and the Hindu religion itself. But the focus really, or the primary tenet there, is Atman is Brahman, or the individual soul is the same as the infinite consciousness or totality. So I use that as a map or a geography for the work with 5-MeO. And it's a lot of fun. And we mainly focus on retreats. At the moment, all group retreats have been postponed due to COVID, but we're still holding private retreats for individuals at the moment. And we've got some fun things happening, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Fair enough. Yeah, really cool. So what was your sort of entrance into the psychedelic world? Did it start with yoga, or did it sort of curtail from something else?
Oh yeah, no, my entrance into the psychedelic world was a good, at least 25 years ago. I was a card-carrying psychonaut since the mid-90s. I used to eat LSD with vigor, really. And, but this was the mid 90s and late 90s and early 2000s. I was into all the other substances as well. But meanwhile, even though I was in the muck of the chaos back then, there was something that stood out to me about entheogens and psychedelics. There was really something there. And I caught the fever. I was reading Timothy Leary's books back then, Aldous Huxley. My parents gave me all of the Carlos Castaneda books when I was a kid. So I was savvy to all that, and I even went down to Peru for my first time to work with curanderos back in 2001. But shortly after that, after I had to learn a lot of lessons of knuckleheadedry the hard ways, I kind of eliminated all substances from my life for a while, and they were reintroduced to me around 2007 or 2008. And at this time, I was living in the Virgin Islands and had a very strong yogic practice. It was right before I began teaching. And my two teachers reintroduced plant medicines to me. And this time re-entering that space and having that geography, of the yogic system there, having that initial understanding of the world of self-inquiry, where normally things would feel uncomfortable and we'd immediately try to turn our eyes from it. I welcome those challenges. So the entheogenic game became a whole new play there. And from there, I kept on moving around the world. I moved to India for a while, lived the ashram life for a while. I moved to Australia back in 2011, opened up a yoga studio there. And I was, all the meanwhile, working with some amazing healers and some amazing medicine people. In Australia, I became firekeeper. And a Peruvian curandero who was coming up, he had done the condor eagle trade, and he was serving peyote rather than ayahuasca. And I became the firekeeper in his ceremonies. Got to learn some amazing stuff. Ended up back in the States and at some point, and started building up more of a yoga company, and started incorporating psychedelics and started bringing them into the retreat format. Now I've been holding retreats for about 10, 11 years, held them all over the world. But when we introduced medicines to them, it became a whole new game, because that geography of having the yogic system and a yoga retreat, but with the added oomph of the medicine, gave it some juice. Yeah.
What was your, do you have like a most memorable retreat, or somebody you've worked with, or even teacher that you want to kind of tell us about?
Absolutely. Oh, that would be a few different things. Let's see.
That was a few different things.
For a memorable teacher, from the yogic side, I got to study under Swami Yogananda, not the Yogananda who did Autobiography of a Yogi, but at that time he was 102 years old. He passed away, I believe, just a few years ago at 107. But I got to study old school yoga with him for a while, living in an ashram in Rishikesh. That was absolutely amazing. I got to sit with Peter Gorman's curandero back before he passed in 2001, which was beautiful. I believe his name was Don Jose. And he was, one of the old schools. He was in his early 90s then, I believe. And I remember going to his hut where he lived, and he had the skulls of all of his ancestors lined up around his place. And he came from a line of curanderos, and the man had hundreds of skulls just lined up, and it was wild. And he said they were the skulls of his family line of curandero, and pretty neat. Saw some wild stuff happen in those sessions. As for most memorable events during retreat,
or maybe the trippiest story you got.
Oh, the trippiest story I got. Oh man,
that's pretty memorable too, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've got. Oh goodness. This, it's funny. The deeper you get into the medicine work, the more ineffable and it's indescribable the medicine experiences become. My super trippy, weird experiences were all so long ago, even though they get weirder and trippier, just harder to explain. But I'll give you a fun example from one of our retreat participants without using any names or any hints. So, trying to think of which one I'll use right now. We've got a couple good ones.
Couple doozies in the bank.
Yeah, a couple doozies in the bank. I'm going to give you our most shocking, wild one. How about that? So this was X retreats ago. And, we do a pretty full-on intake screening beforehand, and especially working with 5-MeO-DMT. And we had a participant who was fairly neglectful in marking off some of the answers. And when that participant arrived at our retreat, we were completely unaware that they were beginning to open up into a psychotic break, and repressed memories from their childhood were beginning to bubble up. And they had not slept in 3 days. We also did not know that 25 years prior, they had been committed for the very same thing. And we proceeded to give this participant the most powerful psychedelic known to mankind. And at that time, this was day 3 of the retreat. We do a fair amount of preparation beforehand. But on day 3, she hadn't slept 3 days. 6 days by now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So things start progressing. This participant had a very dynamic experience, but as with this medicine, many people do. So it was a little more, not really more dynamic than normal, but something was odd about it. We kept an eye, and the next night there was a sound healing. We did a sound up on a rooftop under the stars, and this participant was getting fairly dynamic during the sound bath, we'll say. But this person was also just that type of dynamic person, one of those people who was just kind of like that. And so it was really hard to pinpoint. Maybe a day or two, I think the next day, one of the other retreat participants came up to me and said, "Hey, I think you should go check on, as they are asking about people who are not here." I said, "Oh, really?" And so I go down and I say, "Hey, what's going on?" And this participant says, "Oh, hey, I'm just looking for Kevin. Have you seen him?" There's no Kevin at our retreat. And I said, "Okay, who's Kevin?" And this participant says, "Oh, he's just one of my really good friends from, 20 some odd years ago. I just really need some closure with him and to say goodbye." And I'm looking right in her eyes, and I'm feeling my heart just fully sinking, because I'm realizing this situation is far more serious than we had, previously been thinking. Long story short, well, we'll just say skip a few hours or a few days. The participant did not go to sleep and began going into paranoid delusion. First, there was the UFOs that were stealing the teeth of the participant, or the fillings, at night. So we had to, make a safe space for the participant for that. And then this participant was fearful that we had kidnapped them and we're going to sell them off into trafficking.
Oh, you told me this.
And
that was when. Oh, yeah.
I think your mic is off.
Okay. Sorry, continue.
And, it started to get a little more serious. We had luckily, we team up with clinical people and we team up with Western therapies, even though our specialty is in Eastern therapy. So luckily we had a very, very, very well-suited psychotherapist in arm's reach for that work, who I'm not going to use his name, but world famous integration specialist and fella. And thank God. But essentially the retreat ended. Everyone else had to leave and we kept her there because it was not safe to send this participant back. But essentially, thank God it happened with us, even though during that time it was absolutely terrifying. But if it would have happened in this participant's daily life, they would have for sure been locked up again. But a few scary things happened. There was one morning where my partner came and found me at around 5:36 in the morning, had a fearful look in her eyes and said, "So we just found a pile of this participant's clothes down by the river and no one knows where she is." And we're in a giant desert that happened to have a little river, but a lot of bad implications there. Luckily, I ran like a madman barefoot down a river and found this person a while later. We had an escape attempt. Things got scary, but why I bring that story up, even though it's not the funniest of all wild, trippy experiences, it just goes to show that this stuff can get serious. This stuff can get real serious, and then it's up to us to really to up our game, to really continue to deepen our knowledge base and our skill set to an infinite exponential amount.
Fair enough. But
I would say that'd be our most out there story from retreats thus far.
Oh, I can imagine. And going through that in real time, it would have been, oh, you're not getting on? Oh, you know what? 1 minute.
Actually, I think it was my headphones.
It wasn't my Bluetooth speaker?
No, but I'm having trouble with my Bluetooth speaker, hence why I'm wearing the old headphones.
All right, well, now I'm wearing my Bluetooth.
Perfect.
So this one's probably going to be pretty easy for you, and then we'll skip on to the next 10-minute segment. What is your favorite psychedelic and why?
I guess it would be a little obvious. Of course, I'm fairly monogamous to the God molecule, 5-MeO-DMT. And why? I first tried 5 back in, I think, 2000, maybe even 99. Back then, we could order it off the internet for cheap as all God. And but I don't think, I certainly wasn't ready for that experience then. I don't even remember it. When I was reinitiated into it, I'd been teaching yoga for quite a significant amount of time by then. And I had the full experience, the full 5-MeO mystical godgasm, as I later called it. But I immediately recognized this experience as what the yogis would call nirvikalpa samadhi, or what the Buddhists would call nirvana, or what Christians and Catholics call the beatific vision. It was that essential merging into the infinite, followed by a complete cessation of self-activity. So, the word ego death gets tossed around a whole lot without people really understanding what that means. A real ego death is when the full sense of self dissolves away and awareness merges back with the infinite. The drop rejoins the ocean. And that experience is that ineffable mystical experience that sages and mystics have attempted to understand for millennia. And 5-MeO is a full-on remembrance into that experience. I would say that would be definitely why.
It's definitely a full sender. One of the most profound experiences I've encountered before, that's for certain. This question, I like to open it up with pretty broadly, and then we can get into specifics. But when I say sustainability, what comes to mind for you?
When you say
sustainability, it can be in the industry, in your day-to-day life, in the world, whatever. What's
sustainability immediately comes to my mind is, of course, the toad conservation is a hot topic right now. Is toad sustainable? Toad is catching like wildfire. Everybody wants a piece of the toad ever since it started getting popular, around 6 or 7 years ago. And then, it hit a fever pitch 3 or 4 years ago. And we saw this effect in the toad population. So I think with this medicine in particular, I think more of a focus onto synthetic medicine is definitely a priority and is definitely where we put our focus. But also sustainability in this niche business. we're in a time where there's a lot of psychedelic businesses popping up, mine included. And there's a lot of money being tossed around right now and a lot of money coming into psychedelics. And I think we're going to see a lot of models popping up that are not going to be sustainable, really, that are going to be set up for a big wow and a setup to make a big return very quick. But I think we're going to find that teething, or that teething is going to be something that a lot of the clinical aspect did not expect, especially getting into the realm of 5-MeO DMT. It's being pursued right now, and we're going to see some fireworks go off in the very near future, because this is a bigger medicine than a lot of people understand. And so I think sustainability also means really ensuring practitioners of medicines are taking the time to understand the medicines that they're serving.
Yeah, and so do you want to maybe take a second to explain, kind of a TLDR on how toad is harvested and what the difference is between 5-MeO DMT from a toad and 5-MeO DMT synthesized in a lab?
Absolutely. So from a toad, the 5-MeO DMT is found in the secretion of the Bufo Alvarius toad, or the Sonoran desert toad. It's found in the parotidal glands, and I believe there's 8 glands on the toad that make that you can milk, except it is recommended to only milk the main 2 that are behind the ears or the gills. And the content of 5-MeO DMT in there is anywhere from about 10% to 27%, varying, I believe. And then there's around 11 additional alkaloids. Don't quote me on that number, though. But those additional alkaloids are in trace amounts. And there's a bit of a debate. Some people say those additional alkaloids create no effect. Some say there's an entourage effect of the combined alkaloids. As to where
do you land on that debate?
I land on, I don't notice a bloody difference. I mean, of course, there's a minute difference, but
you're on DMT.
Exactly.
That's the big one.
Yeah, they're both equally as efficient in providing the mystical experience. Actually, I prefer synthetic for that, because there is less other things to be involved. There's a lot of more material for a participant to smoke when it's toad. They might not get the whole hidden. We call synthetic Jaguar, is a lot easier to administer for dosage specificity. You know exactly how much you're giving someone. It's very straight to the point, very easy to hold in, very easy to keep in the lungs, thus easy to really get saturation in there and to go all the way. But, there's a lot of people that will say very differently, say there's a big difference. Some will be for toad, some will be for synthetic. I say those differences are in the mind. I say, it's usually what a person's first time was that they're going to be representing hard. You know what I mean? It's, we tend to attach, exactly. We tend to attach to that which liberates us, just like humans do with religion or spiritual practices. We begin to identify with it and think it's the only way to go. And that's where the fuckery usually comes in.
Fuckery there shall be. What about the other form of DMT, NDMT?
Oh yeah, the spirit molecule, NDMT. Also,
tell us about the difference in that.
And
where does it come from?
When people ask me what the difference is, I generally say, what is the similarity? As there really is none, other than the similarity in chemical structure and in route of administration. DMT is the active ingredient found in one of the 2 active ingredients found in ayahuasca. It's found in multitude of different plants and animals around the world, including human beings, mainly produced in the lungs for humans. It's found mainly in the Mimosa hostilis plant or acacia plant, and a few other ones. It can be extracted, it can be synthesized, it can be eaten or consumed as long as it is combined with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And its effects are far different to that of 5-MeO DMT. Take NDMT, we'll say it is the visual experience. It is taking your awareness to the realm of all probabilities and possibilities, anything that can or ever will be thought or spoken or imagined. It is where, and who knows what's actually happening in there, whether, God, who knows? It's an interesting one. It's a very interesting one. Usually, my most common things I say after an NDMT journey is like, what? It's can be a little confusing sometimes. Yeah. It's a very rapid onset. They are both a very rapid onset, but it's almost like being launched into a fractal hyperspace tunnel. and going into another world that is completely unrecognizable, but strangely familiar and is different every time, and yet somehow the same. But the key thing that separates DMT from 5-MeO is that with NDMT, your mind stays there. The awareness stays intact. The identity or the default mode network in the brain is still fully going. So there is still an observer. There's still a sense of self to be there and be like, wow, this is absolutely ridiculous. Whereas in a peak experience with 5-MeO, there is not even a sense of self to say, oh my goodness.
That's a really good transition into our third 10-minute segment, the art of being incognito and how you harness it. So definition of cognito is the philosophical principle that one's existence is demonstrated by the fact that one thinks, or the intellectual processes of the self or the ego. So how would you say you harness, that kind of art of being aware of thyself, thy thought processes, and really your ego at the end of the day?
How do we harness it?
How do you specifically?
Me specifically with the system of yoga.
And then we can get into the day.
Yeah. I specifically use the lens of yoga. Now, the backbone of the yoga scriptures is the Yoga Sutras. And the second verse is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That is, yoga is a calming of the fluctuations of the mind, or yoga is a cessation of the whirlwind of mind. So yoga is not, it's a lot less of an activity we do physically. That's one small aspect of it, but an experience in of itself, and then a geography how to get to and from it. So we take scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, which has Arjuna and Lord Krishna, and Krishna is appearing as his charioteer, and the 5 horses represent the 5 senses, and it's all about reigning in the senses. So using a system or using a geography to constantly be self-aware, to constantly be observing how we're ticking, our own emotional patterning, and unravel it bit by bit. Anytime we have a thought or have an action or say something that pulls us out of that unity feeling, that pulls us away from remembering that our ego is just a tool for individuality, then we can investigate that thought, investigate where that came from, pull that thread up, really see where its roots are. It may be something that my father said to me as a child that left me feeling a certain way. Once you get to the root of it, you can just pluck that thread out and let it go. Sooner or later, you've unraveled the whole veil. And you're no longer bound by emotional patterns that allow you to, or force you to forget your separateness or your unity, excuse me.
Fair enough. And so do you find, this is generally something I like to ponder in the psychedelic industry specifically, do you find that there is less of an ego barrier with people that you're working with, interacting with, maybe even investors that you're having calls with on a day-to-day basis? Do you kind of notice that, lack of attachment to thyself and more sort of overall awareness and community, I guess?
It really depends. There's certain parts of the community that are there because it is a cool thing and it looks cool. There are certain parts of the community that are really in there and doing the work. I get some participants that right away I can tell, okay, there's going to be some difficulties letting go here. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. We've all got our own path or our own journey to surrender. And, while certain people I serve, let's say, I've served Olympic athletes, I've served a lot of professional athletes, and some who have never even smoked cannabis. And while at first I expected them to have difficulties because I'm about to serve them the world's most potent psychedelic, people with solid discipline and have control and an understanding and a relationship with their mind tend to surrender easy. People with a yogic practice or a meditation practice tend to surrender easily. Those who have faced the possibilities of death, I work with a lot of terminally ill patients and elders, they tend to surrender easier as well. And thus, and on the other hand, certain people who need to be in complete control over their surroundings and everything and are not yet ready to accept that there may be more to the existence than what they're witnessing now, they're usually going to have a little more difficulty. But, it all comes down to preparation. And we meet people where they're at. So certain people need me to speak to them in, spiritual languages. Certain people need me to speak to them in more logical languages. So meeting participants where they're at and really getting to understand their own path to surrender and helping them see that path.
Fair enough. And do you find, and pardon me while I kind of swat intermittently, I'm killing mosquitoes like 5-MeO-DMT kills egos. Do you find that in your work is, somebody that has a bit more of an ego, you could say, or, is really just more absolute in their ways, their thought processes, who they are? Is it harder to treat them with 5-MeO or other psychedelics, or, is it different than somebody that's maybe really humble, kind, like, kind of isn't really attached to themselves or their thought processes?
Great point. And that's really going to depend on their integration. That's going to really depend on kind of what they're doing with it afterwards. So, we can say 5-MeO kills the ego, but, the ego just doesn't disappear. The ego goes and pumps weights and gets ripped while it's been away and comes back ready to reassert dominance. The ego just had the carpet pulled out from under it, and it needs to come back and show that it knows how to play this game. And so if people are not taking a direct route to integrating that experience into their daily life and to constant self-observation, because the ego is going to attach to the experience it had. You're going to come out of the experience, and that experience itself is ineffable, but the mind is still going to attempt to compartmentalize it. And if we do not have exactly, and if we don't have some sort of process or practice to check our ego and check our awareness, then we're going to begin to bypass certain areas, and we're going to begin to use our experience to build up our ego rather than to develop a relationship. And then you end up with those big messiah complexes and practitioners that think they're the messiah and think that they are healing people. And it becomes
the art of being out of cognito.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's kind of something I wanted to touch on actually is, there's a lot of quote unquote plastic shamans out there with the development of the medicine. There's a lot of really good, solid shamans. How does one, when they're looking for a medicine worker, determine the difference or be able to kind of filter between the good and the bad if they generally don't know anything about psychedelics or the industry?
I would say first research, looking into what you want to find in a practitioner. I know Aware Project has a great thing of that on their website. I know Third Wave does, I think, as well. A bunch of different publications have kind of good things on what to look for. So look for what you want to find in a practitioner of that particular medicine. If they've got a public profile or anything like that, look for people who have experienced medicine with them, and look for how they handle themselves. Look at their social media. Is their social media filled with, I do this, I am this, I heal you, you are coming to me broken and I will fix you? Because I've been seeing a lot of that rubbish lately. Look to see how far up their head is inserted, and judge from there. Because it's a problem now, especially since spirituality has become so popular on social media, and now psychedelics are, seeing this huge boom. Is a lot of, it draws narcissists like moths to light, and so just watch for how people carry themselves. If they're, it's a delicate one, but also, feel into the type of feeling you get from that person. Feel into how they communicate, always set up a call or something to talk to a practitioner before you sit with them, some sort of little chat, and feel into how they greet you, how they meet you. What kind of questions are they asking? Does it feel like they're keeping you safe? Does it feel like they're mentally equipped to keep you safe? Does it feel like they have the tools to help you integrate afterwards? Or does it feel like they're just going to crack you open and then just leave you be? Things like that.
Later, yeah.
Yeah.
Vibratory research, I guess you could call it.
Exactly.
Fair enough. And do you, aside from the people that you're working with and the company that you keep, do you have any recommendations maybe of, all-star shamans, medicine healers, energy workers, anyone out there that you want to kind of shout out, just give a little love?
For practitioners, that's the best ones I can think of right now. We're not going to want me to say their names. I will say the name of one group, Temple of Awakened Divinity. Temple of Awakened Divinity. If you ever hear about them or know anyone who sits with them, I highly advise to try and get a referral with them. A work of mastery when it comes to serving this particular medicine. And, there's some other great projects happening, but, as far as there's a center that's going to be opening in Austin, Texas called Kuya. That is Dr. Dan Engel's center. And that is going to be something like we have never seen before. I would highly recommend anyone looking into that. It should be opening in a few months. But other than that, you're going to see a lot of stuff popping up, later this year. And this is just the beginning. It's going to be a beautiful time.
We're in for a wild ride. That's for certain. Joël, thank you for doing this. I appreciate your time and coming on the podcast. If people want to hit you up in the DMs, learn more, or just get in touch, how do they find you?
Yep. So you can find me on Instagram as Joël, the entheogenic yogi, and there's underscores in between each of those words. And also our group site is Kaivalya Kollectiv. Kaivalya is Kaivalya, and then Kollectiv is Kollectiv. Always mess with their minds. And you can reach me at joel@kaivalyakollectiv.com.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely, Brethren. Take care.
Adios.
All right. Ciao.
Thanks for joining the Incognito series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.